What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Chad and I are back for part 2 of how a professional versus an amateur attack a PBA oil pattern. And if you guys didn't see the first one, I'll try to link it up here. Basically what we did was we went through how a professional and an amateur go about bowling on a professional oil pattern. This is kind of like the stuff that we see on the regional tour more. You don't normally see softer patterns like this on the national tour. We're bowling on 43 feet. Earl Anthony?
Don Johnson?
No.
Earl Anthony.
Earl Anthony.
Earl Anthony, yes.
43 feet,
Sorry.
Earl Anthony, 3-1, a little bit softer of a sport shot, definitely tougher than a traditional house shot.
Especially if you're in the wrong part of the lane.
Especially if you're in the wrong part of the lane, yeah, especially. So what did we learn on the fresh that we can take into transition? I know what I learned.
So, you know, the biggest thing, and you know, we talked about it in episode 1 and stuff, where I was going to throw urethane. And urethane, there were times I missed shots, and I didn't miss it by a little. I missed it, you know, by 6-7 boards, and it just kind of held all the way up, you know, and still was able to strike.
I did not have that look on the fresh.
No.
I needed to be way more accurate.
Well, and the part of that is again the flatter pattern. If you start too far left where it's really flat, as soon as the ball sees friction, it wants to take off. So it's really hard to repeat those types of shots or have consistency, especially if you're, you know, maybe not throwing it the best. You throw it 70%, and 70% is going to leave you a lot of washouts and big splits.
Yeah, I mean, 70% on house shot is amazing. I mean, like it can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On sport shots, absolutely not. Guys, make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe, because if you don't subscribe, Chad's going to steal all your bowling balls, and we're going to sell them, and we're going to become billionaires.
Ka-ching.
I don't know that we could become billionaires, but... No, but seriously, guys, just subscribe. Jeez, I'm trying to catch Darren. At this point, I have no chance of catching Darren.
Yeah.
I'm like 100,000 behind Darren. Stop playing with that, jeez. So, now that we kind of went over this a little bit in the outro of episode 1, and again, if you guys didn't watch that, then this video is kind of meaningless, right? Because
there's still education you can get from it.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely some education you can get, but at least you can see what we actually did to the lanes on episode 1.
Very true.
So the big thing I think that we talked about at the end was just because you are exiting the fresh and entering that transitional phase, and I go like this because transition can go on forever. Doesn't necessarily mean that you even have to ball down. It doesn't mean that you have to move in. It doesn't mean really anything. It just means that what you were doing on the fresh is not there anymore.
Correct.
And you have to do something different.
Yep.
Whether it's, you mentioned slowing down with the urethane ball, or for me it could be going, this is what I'm going to do, is going to a ball that has a similar RG, similar differential, but it's symmetric, which will allow me to shape it a little bit more. Like for me, I went from the Magic Gem. Now I'm going to really take a look at that Summit. Same hybrid cover, you know, similar RG, similar differential, but a symmetric core.
So for you, just on the amateur side, just want to ask you, what makes you want to go from where you were with the Magic Gym into a Summit? Like, what are your thoughts going into that?
So my thought process is that the symmetrical core, for me, I've always felt like the symmetrical balls give me more shape down lane, whereas the ASIM balls typically tend to roll a little bit more forward, and I typically play closer to the friction than someone like you who has a higher rev rate. So my thought process is, okay, if I stay in the same zone with the Summit, I should see a little bit more continuation down lane and not as that hook stop motion that I started to see at the end with the Magic Gem.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm in a spot yet where I need something polished. Maybe when we get to that burn section. Is that thought process incorrect?
It's not necessarily incorrect, because, I mean, this is where coming to know your arsenal comes into play. Some people might go to, like, you know, you allude to the phase 2 earlier and stuff like that. You know, kind of being able to stay in that similar part of the lane without having to chase it so much. Because the more we go to chase it, remember, that middle part may or may not be defined really any.
Correct.
So if you miss a little bit, now we miss the head pin altogether. So when we look at those characteristics, you're going from a big ball in a Magic Gym still into a big ball with the Summit. The only thing is you also got to remember, generally asymmetric wants to help also create a little bit of push for you as well. So if you happen to see that Summit want to grab just a little bit earlier because of the dynamic of the ball and the shape of it, then you might have to start thinking, hey, I still need to be in a big ball, but I'm going to go with an asymmetric ball type aspect again, but I might have to step down, to be able to do that same aspect.
Like a weaker asymmetric ball.
Correct.
Okay, which I don't have with me today. But it's good because now I know like Tour Dynamics type weak or like Virtual Energy type weak.
Tour Dynamics actually probably would look pretty good for you right now.
Just something controllable that still has a little asymmetry.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I'm not only gonna, like in the first video, I only threw the Magic Gem basically.
Yep.
I'm definitely gonna throw the Phase 2 and the Summit in conjunction to see which one of those two gives me the better look. And what are you gonna do? You're gonna stay in that fast pitch?
I'm gonna stay in the fast pitch for a few shots, and I'm gonna try to slow it down and kind of show how urethane can still make shape, but we have to do some different things to it. But again, if that doesn't look good, then I'll probably end up going back to the Exponent, and then it'll probably be a combination between the Exponent and that Nova.
The 7-inch pin Nova.
The 7-inch pin Nova.
Which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
The reality did look pretty good, but it seemed like you went away from it pretty quickly. Is it because it was a little bit too forward down lane?
Yeah, for me, so my reality is drilled a little bit shorter pin. It's like a 3.5-inch pin. So it wants to see the lane, and it's one of those balls that allows me to control the shape a little bit more so. So you notice that when it makes shape, it kind of has a tendency to flatten out. It's not one of those balls that I'm going to try to circle the entire lane with. When we get to burn, I might show what I'm talking about when it comes to that aspect with that. But for the most part, I want to try to stay further right as long as possible before chasing it, left. Because if this was an 8-game block and I'm already chasing it, 3 games in to basically 4th, 5th arrow, that means we're going to be playing like the U.S. Open.
Yeah, what's going to happen Game 7, Game 8? Yeah.
40 feet down lane. So
yeah, which we don't want to do ever.
Nope. I'm not Marshall Kent, sorry.
No, yeah. I did notice that in your arsenal today, you didn't have anything with polish. And me as the amateur, I brought 2 balls polished. What goes into your logic or your reasoning, your thinking, whatever, into not bringing anything with polish?
So the thing with not bringing anything polished is, again, with my rev rate and everything else, I need the ball to slow down. I don't need help seeing friction. I need the ball to slow down in order to be successful. With polish for me, especially when it's just you and I. Now, if we were bowling a full block, of course I would have something to polish.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just us 2 on the lane. It's not, 2 or 3, is it like 3 people on a lane typically?
3 to 4, yeah.
3 to 4 in the lane by 32 lanes going,
Right. And the other thing is the rev rates that come into play, right? When we start looking at rev rates, most of the guys on the regional side are in that mid-4 range type aspect. So the lanes will break down so quick in a lot of regards, depending on where we're bowling and the pattern and everything else. So of course, polish then is going to come into play.
What's your rev rate?
Last is like 470, 480.
Yeah, so like I'm on the lower end of rev rate on the regional side. If I was a regional player, and the last I checked was like 390. So in typical leagues and stuff, 390 is more than enough.
Correct.
And a lot of times in league, I'm not the lowest rev rate on the pair.
Right.
Like I'm not the lowest rev rate on my team. I wasn't the like we bowled against each other last night. From the time we're filming this, I was probably maybe 4th highest rev rate on the pair because it was you, the 2-hander, and then who else?
Guba's got to be up there. He rolls the ball really well.
Yeah.
But
So,
he's got to be in the low 4s.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm like 4th, but on the regional side of it, I'm definitely on the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. What I lack in rev rate, I make up for in spin.
Spin to win, baby.
Spin to win. All right, so I hope you guys are enjoying all these shots, and hopefully we don't look too bad in this transitional phase. All right, so now we're all done with episode number 2 on the transition. And the biggest thing that I noticed is that on the fresh, I was left of you, and in transition, I am significantly right of you.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Why is that?
So, knowing, again, from seeing and knowing what happens with urethane usage early on, it creates hold. So now for me, it's just a matter, for the most part, of just getting the ball right. And it'll get to the pocket. It's just a matter if it will carry. Like, I didn't miss the hole a single time, no matter what really ball I threw for the most part.
Yeah.
When I got to the exponent, when I threw, I was in that urethane, but then when I switched over, basically that exponent was a little too quick, so I moved just a hair deeper, and then it mellowed everything out.
It looked amazing.
And then
yeah. Because for me, I thought the summit looked really good. I thought the phase 2 was a little bit too forward. And then in the exponent, for me, I felt like I was trapped in I couldn't really get the ball right. I don't know, I didn't throw a single one to the right, but it felt like I couldn't get it to the right, and there was so much hold in. And I guess that's the biggest difference between an amateur and a professional, is that I'm like terrified of that hold, and you're using it to your advantage.
Correct.
That's the biggest difference, guys. Join us in episode 3, which will be the burn. Would you confidently say that we're in the burn now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting close to the gutter, so.
The left gutter, folks, for the record, the left gutter. He's closer to the left gutter than I am the right gutter.
But yeah, it's definitely transitioning a little bit quicker now. Part of it, I think it's also warming up. You know, that obviously plays a factor into it as well. So, but now that I'm throwing reactive and not just urethane, it's speeding the lane a little bit better. So,
all right, we'll see you in episode 3.